Welcome to another episode of the Physically Jacked and Financially Stacked podcast. I'm sure Matt will like the name of this. So today we've got a very special guest, Mr. Matt Haycox. So Matt is an entrepreneur, investor, and a big networker here in Dubai who was very fortunate to speak on his podcast and also got invited on a boat in a very nice networking event. He's also recently had his second child recently, so huge congratulations onto that. So thank you very much for your time today, Matt.
Thanks for having me, buddy.
One thing that, to get into things, firstly really brought me into you is that when I first found out about you and you invited me on the podcast, is your background in terms of where you started from, your initial success and how it all went tits up and you like rose from the ashes again. Would you mind explaining a short synopsis into that backstory?
Yeah, I mean, I'll make it short. If you want me to
make it exciting,
flesh out any bits I can do. But look, long story short, I always wanted to be in business. You know, I never particularly knew what business I wanted to be in. I just knew I wanted to be a business owner, which, if anything, back in the kind of early 90s was more because that was perceived as the only real way to make any money. You know, if you wanted to be rich, if you wanted to be a millionaire, you know, you had to own your own business. So I spent my teenage years, you know, reading every business book, every business biography I could get my hands on. My dad was also a business owner himself, so obviously that rubbed off me in some way, shape or form. And like I said, I spent my 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 trying everything from selling plastic cushions at the market to selling Tamagotchi pets to, you know, I was also a magician. So I used to do table magic for 2 years in a local Italian restaurant, anything I could to make money. Finished my A-levels. My parents were very pro-education, particularly my mum. I think that was a combination of the fact that, you know, my mum had never being able to do the educational career she wanted to do. I think she got TB or something, or pneumonia when she was in a GCSE, so she never did education thereafter. So she kind of, I think, wanted to live her educational life through me and used to push my A-levels on me and push my uni on me. But also back in the, you know, the kind of mid to late 90s, if you didn't have a university degree, you would very much find it difficult to get any kind of placement in a corporate environment. I mean, I think it was almost, I'd go as far as to say, if you didn't have a university degree, then you'd be thought of as a failure, really. So my parents very much pushed me into it. I didn't want to do it just because I kind of knew in my head that I was always going to own my own business. The university degree wouldn't add any value, and if anything, it was holding me up 3 or 4 years of getting started. I managed to convince my parents to not make me go to uni. It took a year off, and I kind of said, look, I'm going to try and make my millions during this year off, and if I fail, then I can go back to uni in a year's time, and we just consider it a gap year like all my friends were taking, so it doesn't really hold me up. And off I went, and my dad had just invested in a uniform business at the time. They made corporate clothing for bus drivers, security guards, and nurses. And I went there to work in the sales department. My dad was a very passive investor, you know, too passive as the story goes on. And I was looking at this business that was just being ruined on a daily basis by the incumbent management team and the old family that used to own it. And I was still living with my parents at the time, so I used to go home every night kind of banging on the dinner table saying, Dad, you know, they're screwing you, you know, they're taking the piss here, they're losing your money. You've got to come in, get back to work and come and do something about it. And he kind of agreed with me. You know, he used to say, I don't disagree with you, but I just can't be bothered. You know, I've just retired after 30 years of business. I've had 30 years of business. I've had 25 years of your mother. You know, the last thing I need to do is come in there. And I think because he had some cash around him at the time, it made him lazy, and he was, happy to, I guess, lose the cash and save the time. After 2 or 3 months of my bleatings, he finally gave in and said, you know what, just go in there and do something with it yourself. You know, he never gave me the business. He just basically said, you can't fuck it up as much as any worse than anybody else has done. So go and do your worst. And I went in the next day, fired everybody apart from this little old fellow who worked in the warehouse, a guy called Bob. I can still remember him to this day. And we restarted the business from scratch, not because I knew what I should be doing or what was right. I kind of just knew that everything they were doing was wrong, and it was going to be baptism by fire, trial and error. And over the next 3 years, we dealt with every conceivable problem you could imagine. I mean, we had suppliers who weren't suppliers. We had non-existent customers. We had to reinvent the whole product range and decide how we were going to go to market. Had to restaff the business. We had to rebuild relationships with the bank. Operational issues, marketing issues, everything possible. Everything possible that could go wrong had gone wrong, and everything that that needed fixing by me. And when I started with the business, we were losing about £300,000 a year. And after 3 years, we made 30 grand. It was our first annual profit. And I guess it wasn't the amount of money, it was just the sheer fact of the turnaround and the learning curve, and that we'd taken this loss-making business, and I'd learnt I guess at the time what felt like everything I needed to learn during that time. I was then bored, really, because I think at that point, I realised back then and know now that I like the cut and thrust of being an entrepreneur, of coming up with an idea and of executing on that idea. I'm not a manager of people. I can't really do long-term management and strategy, and it was time for me to leave. I left. My dad actually did then come back in because he was a lot more, let's say, disciplined and structured and managerial than me, and I went on my way to go and do the next chapter of my life, which was going to be in leisure. I wanted to open bars and clubs, not because I knew anything about them, but I just thought, as a 21, 22-year-old guy who doesn't want to own a bar, because all that money that goes over the till must be yours to keep, and we get to drink beer and meet girls. So what a perfect business. So I opened a community pub. Just obviously you're English, you know what these grotty little community pubs are like on one of the worst council estates in Leeds, and it was it ticked over. It was semi-successful. Had 2 or 3 of these over the next year or two period, but I knew that I couldn't make enough money from selling alcohol alone. Certainly not selling alcohol at that price and those margins. So I wanted to add something else to the income stream, something else to the income mix. Whether it was going to be promoters and DJs, or door money, or ticket money, food, whatever. But in my personal life back then, I was spending pretty much every free hour in the local strip club, and the amount of time I was spending there, all the girls I knew, the manager, the staff, kind of in my head qualified me to understand the business model of being a strip club owner, and I was going to go and add that to my leisure knowledge, and that was how I was going to find high margin, low overhead business. So I poached a guy who was the manager or the assistant manager of the local club, found a venue in Wakefield, and opened my first strip club back in March 2004. So, and I guess that was then really the beginning of chapter number 3 for me, which, over the next 3 or 4 years, I got introduced to a finance broker. I mean, I knew nothing about raising money at that point. And it's funny because when I left the uniform business, I always say I kind of dealt with every problem imaginable, learnt everything there was I needed to learn. More things were thrown at me than any other business owners probably had in their entire life, or 99% of other business owners have had in their entire life. But then when I left there and then went into the leisure business, it was like, wow, I'm kind of back to square one again, because this is a whole new sector, a whole new industry, and a whole new learning curve. So by the time I'm on chapter 3, I'm then back to the beginning again of all these things I know, but now I don't know how to raise money. So really spent my time over the next 3 or 4 years growing that business by acquisition and by opening new venues, but always by raising more and more money. I mean, look, it was a time back then when it was kind of easy to raise money. The early to mid 2000s, every lender wanted to lend, and if you were a borrower with any kind of concept or any kind of track record, you could borrow that money. Grew that business. By 2008, I was the biggest strip club operator in the UK. I had 11 strip clubs, 65 bars and pubs, restaurants, shops, property portfolio, eight-figure business, but by anybody's count. And then with the onset of the credit crunch, the fact that my lenders then tightened up and ultimately pulled the plug, and I was completely over-leveraged, completely undercapitalised, and within the space of about 3 or 4 weeks, went from 8-figure business to losing the lot overnight, and was declared both corporately and personally bankrupt in, I think it was September 2008 now, and lost a lot overnight, and on we go to chapter number 4. It's probably time for me to take a breath and you to ask a question, right?
So that's obviously a bit of a whirlwind and a very quick roller coaster from where you started and up. One thing I really liked is how you started so young. Do you think in some respects, because you started so young, you were like clear-minded, you didn't have preconceived ideas about stuff in terms of business? So you were open to, you didn't have like bad habits ingrained in some respects?
I mean, maybe no preconceptions of life. I mean, I'm not sure it would have made it any difference to me in business if I was 5 years older or 25 years older. I mean, I guess that would have depended how I'd spent that time. I mean, maybe if I'd have owned different businesses, then I would have had different thought processes or behaved differently when I did it, or maybe if I was just older and longer in the tooth, I wouldn't have maybe taken the risks and stuff that I did do. I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, it's funny because I sometimes talk to my dad. He's still a businessman himself now. He's had a lot of ups and downs along the way, and unfortunately, he's more in the down phase now. And I try and push him on things to do, and he always talks to me about the fact that we're in very different stages of our life, and that I can take the risks I take because I'm young enough. I'm young enough to have the time ahead of me, which I understand what he's saying, or I kind of get the concept. But I also then think that whether I was 42 or 72, I'd still be doing the same things I'm doing because it's ingrained in me really. And I think for me a life without risk would be boring. But I don't mean that in a, let's say, a reckless way. I don't want to do a parachute jump without a parachute. I think that there's logic and mitigants to everything I do, but I think ultimately you're either a risk taker and a grower or you're not. And so yeah, I don't know if I'd have done things differently. If I'd have been older, I would definitely do things differently now. Knowing what I've learned over the last 25 years. But yeah.
In terms of obviously going from an 8-figure business to zero in a very short period of time, how did you mentally handle that process? Because what I see with working with a lot of younger entrepreneurs, their fear of failure throttles them so much that's probably the biggest thing that holds them back, that they're worried about fucking up. And the reality is that a lot of the time I say to them, it's probably not going to be that bad if even if it happens. If you think the worst case, if I look at the worst case scenario for me, if everything fucked up and I lost everything, I'm moving with my parents who live in Marbella in Spain, and I'd probably end up PTing people, and that's not the end of the world until I got back on my feet.
I think it was never particularly difficult for me, and I think that's not so much that I was mentally strong, but I think the issues that get in the way for anyone are ego, and also normally their partner. I was going to say a woman, but I don't want to be sexist. But whether it's a man or woman, that typically, I guess that they're interfering or you're doing things based on them. I was quite comfortable to lose the money because A, I knew I was going to make it back at some point. B, I'd always had a very clear rule with my ex-wife, she was at the time, or any woman I've been in a serious relationship with, in that if you're not bringing any money to the table, don't discuss mine with me in the slightest. You're more than happy for you to enjoy the benefits of what I've got, and we can spend together, we can enjoy, but you will never tell me not to risk our money. You will never tell me what to do or what not to do. Now, obviously, as I've gotten older, I maybe not be as utterly risk-taking as I would have been back then. I might not lose the house that we live in right now, but I'd happily risk losing everything else around it. And so I think for me, it's been important to have the right partner who is tolerant of that, but also, like I say, the lack of ego for me, that I know that kind of I make the money doesn't make me. And look, I'm obviously going to be probably in a better mood if I was sat on money than the day that I've lost it all. But I can still go and hold my head high with my mates or the people that matter to me, because I know that ultimately, that money doesn't make me, that money doesn't change me, and I still feel, you call it arrogance or whatever, but I still feel confident in me, whether I've got the money or not. And so I guess going back to probably where you were going with the question, which was how did I recover from the failure, and how did I kind of get up the next day to go back to work? I always say that I don't particularly have a fancy answer or particularly motivating answer, other than the fact that I didn't have any choice. I was 28. My wife, I had the ex-wife, and I had a 1-year-old daughter. And it was very much for me a matter of, well, I can sit at home and I can moan about this, and it's going to achieve nothing, and it's not going to put any food on the table, and it's not going to help the daughter, or I can get back out to work and crack on with it. And yes, I've fallen down the ladder. Yes, I'll eat a bit of humble pie and have to start from square one. But again, I wasn't starting from square one because I may have had no money, but I had 7 or 8 years of experience and contact base and everything else. So I knew in myself I was going to make the money back, and I was probably going to make it back quicker than I did the time before.
I think what's really interesting there, and I think about it a lot, is it's not necessarily even the money, it's the skills you acquire and the network of people you acquire to get the money in the first place. Like if that's all gone, you still have all the skills and the network in the first place. So it's easy for you to get back there much quicker, and you've learnt the lessons and the trials and tribulations for you to get there. After coming out of that, what did you do in terms of businesses from there, in terms of like, okay, well, this chapter's gone, like out the leisure industry and strip clubs and all that fun stuff. What do I do next? How did you handle that thought process?
Well, I needed to do something that wasn't particularly capital intensive at that point, because I didn't have any, and also it wasn't a great climate to be raising any money in either. So my initial plan was simply just to get some income and I guess effectively sell my skill set, sell my time for some cash. And before the leisure had gone under, I was already doing a bit of lending and a bit of finance broking, and that was a business that I'd slipped into by accident, really, that having spent so much time raising money for my own businesses, some of my friends or peers who had similar businesses or businesses that would in sectors that struggled to raise money, that I kind of became the go-to guy of, Matt from Leeds who can raise money from people we don't even know exist, for quirky situations. Never particularly huge amounts of money. It might have been 25 grand here, 50 grand there, and growing. But I'd started a bit of a finance brokerage, before the businesses went into bankruptcy, and I then kind of carried on with that afterwards. I wouldn't even particularly say it was a thought out plan that that this is where my future is going to be in chapter number 4. It was just more the fact of I needed to make some money. That was a skill set I had, and it was a pretty high margin business that I could crack on with on my own. And then that I guess effectively naturally developed to where we are today. That I went from finance broker to lender. Obviously in a much smaller way. I mean, I've been lending again for the last probably 10 years, and if you go back 10 years ago, I probably had a total portfolio of 100 grand, and I'm making 10 grand loans, and then I found another investor, so we maybe had 250 grand, and we're making 20 grand loans. And as time's gone on, we've grown that investor base, we've grown that access to capital, and if you look at where we are today, I mean the lending book's about 60 million quid, and I've lent over 500 million to businesses in the UK over the last 10 years, and it's really just been an accumulation and compounding of applying the same models, the same logic. I mean, obviously our lending model is. It's not that our lending model is different to what anybody else does, but probably our attitude to lending. And in the early days, we had to. It wasn't a well thought out PR stunt that I was going to say I was a borrower before I was a lender. I'm a business owner, not a bank manager. But I kind of had to do that just to own my problem at the time, because obviously I had some bad Google around me from what had happened, and there was no point really trying to hide it. I really more had to put my hands up and say, yes, I fucked up, but I'm sorry I fucked up. However, these are the skill sets I've learned along the way, and now let me use those skill sets to make you better, and to make my businesses better. So we kind of accidentally started to, I guess, sell off the back of my background and my backstory, and now that very much has become the whole ethos of the businesses that we're involved in. That I've had a 25-year career of problems and making mistakes and highs and lows, but I always say. And I don't think it's ever anywhere truer than in lending, that you don't learn anything from the things that go right. You only learn things from the things that go wrong. Because when something goes right, well, it just goes right. Okay, if you want to have the arrogance to say that's vindicated your plan and it went right because you had this great plan, well then fine. But you don't really know that's what happened. But when something goes wrong, it's very easy to then look back and say, well, why did it go wrong? These are the steps that have gone wrong along the way. And I always say that our customers or people that want advice or people who want me to invest in their businesses, they don't have the answers to the questions, or they don't know how to deal with the problems because they've never been there before. And unfortunately, most of the problems that these people have, they're probably once in a lifetime. They are once in a lifetime problems. And I seem to have had quite a lot of once in a lifetime problems over the last 25 years. So that's kind of how I monetize that skill set.
So there's obviously a lot of learning experiences come from the problems you've had. One of the things you mentioned, which was interesting, with regards to managing finances and a partner and business and partner. What have you learned with that over the years? And in terms of how do you segregate the two, if that makes sense?
How do I segregate the finances?
So say you mentioned before in terms of keeping your partner out the finances in terms of her involvement. Because I think it's very easy sometimes, in particular if shit's hitting the fan for someone, their partner gets in the area and it throws their head in terms of decision making and what they should be doing.
How I was going to say, I'm trying to think of how I would put that into formal advice. I mean, for me, it's just always been very much this isn't even on the table as something to discuss. They say, I don't know, take Elena, my current partner. I mean, what's that current partner? my partner for now and the future. I mean, look, we met 2 years ago. When I was 40 and she was 25 or 26. With the greatest of respects, I'm not going to sit down with you and start working through my bank balances and assets and businesses and whatever, and it really kind of is that simple for me. If you want something, ask me, and I'm sure we've got the money and you can have it. If the answer is it doesn't suit me, then it doesn't suit me. But you're not in a position to start dictating to me how I run my businesses or how we spend our personal money. Now everyone's going to have their own view on that. But that's just my view, and I think, look, if you've been together since you're 18 years old, and you've been a Mr. and Mrs. team since then, and you've had kids together, and you've had a plan, and she's always made the house good and always brought the kids up, and you've been out to work every day, then that's a different story. Okay, someone who wants to be negative about it will say, well, he's earned 100 million and she's just raised the kids. You could have hired someone to do that for 500 grand. But I don't think that's not a fair answer. If you've really both started from the bottom, then you've both started from the bottom. But I think when I come into a relationship, or when somebody else comes into a relationship, from a superior, if you like, position of wealth, and a different backstory, then you shouldn't have to discuss it with them, and that's how I see it for my personal life. But when I look at businesses that have got problems, or businesses that have failed that we've looked to support, many times they failed because the personal partner of the person looking to borrow the money, wouldn't do something like, I don't know, sign a personal guarantee or give a charge over a house, or a family asset or whatever. Now again, I can't speak for everybody's individual circumstances at that point, but if we talk about me right now, if I want to give a charge over my house, and I'll give a fucking charge over my house, and I'm sorry, Elena, or whoever it is for that person in that situation. It's not for you to discuss. And if I lose the house and you therefore want to leave me, then fucking leave me. If you only came with me for the money, then fine. But it's not a particularly complex or deeply thought out answer, but you know what I mean. I just think if someone isn't bringing that to the table, then they just don't have the right to get involved. And I think it's very important. I always say you either got to have the right partner or no partner. Otherwise, you will find big success in business, but never mind business, in anything, very, very difficult, if not impossible. I think it's the same whether you're a business owner, whether you're a top performing athlete, or anything really. When you need to be able to keep your head down and concentrate on the task in hand, without someone pecking in your ear.
Do you think men would be more successful to be single than be in relationships?
I mean, if I had to give let's say a not deep answer, I'd say yes. The reason I say not deep answer is because, look, if we're going to go deep on it, it's going to depend on the right person and everything. But I think in the main, the reason that I'd say yes to the answer is because most people are in the wrong relationship. If people were in the right relationships, then maybe the answer wouldn't be that you should be single. You should be in the right relationship, because I think in the same way that you can go further with a business partner if it's the right business partner, you can probably go further with the right romantic partner, as opposed to being single, because they can bring you some balance, they can bring you some support. You can help each other in different ways. But the reality is, most people don't have the right partner, and that partner at home, whether it's a man or whether it's a woman, you're bringing each other down. You're making each other's life shit. So yeah, really, it's just a distraction from being successful in whatever it is you want to be successful in.
100% agree. One thing that I've seen from the outside you seem to do very well is managing your personal relationships and working very long hours of business, like you said, like you normally work till 9 p.m. at night. How do you structure that in terms of like a week for anyone listening, like comparative? Because people like to learn from people who've done very well. Is that you have certain nights you spend a week with Elena, or how do you tend to structure that?
I mean, we have had to discuss it a little bit more lately because, I mean, Elena causes me no grief in 99% of our relationship, and I really couldn't ask for anything better. We she lets me get on with what I want to get on with. She's good fun. She'll allow my inappropriate jokes and banter and whatever. So I really can't complain. I guess the difference between me and her is I love being on my own, and she loves being with people, and obviously, and by people, she loves being with her partner, who she chose to be with. So we do sometimes have a bit of a balancing act issue. That if it was up to her, she'd spend 24/7 with me. I mean, literally all day, every day. And if it was up to me, I could lock myself in the office for the next month and never come home. But I guess the way I tend to plan my day here, I say here because obviously we're in Dubai, but I work. Not so much just UK hours, but I work UK business. I'll get up at 8 o'clock in the morning, which I know I'm sure lots of people listening to this will think it's not very early because obviously there's this macho alpha thing about you've got to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, but it just doesn't suit me because I like to be up late at night. So I get up at 7:45, 8 o'clock. If anything, I'd like to get up later, to be honest, but then I think I am eating into the day too much. I'll go and work out. It's probably an hour and a half. And then I'll come home, have some breakfast with Elena, do a few emails, kind of potter around the house and hang out with her for a bit until maybe 11:30. And then I'll get on with my day because 11:30 is 7:30 in the UK. And I'll start to work with England. I'll start to work on my Dubai stuff. And then I'll work through until, 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And it might then be a dinner with friends, or it might be a business dinner. Typically, I mean, there's not many dinners I go out to where Elena wouldn't be coming. I mean, if it was a completely new investor meeting that was going to be 100% business talk, then yeah, sure, she wouldn't come. But if it was networking type meetings, I'd be more than happy for her to come to most of those with me. Maybe she'll, if I've got a bit of time in the day, she'll bring me a bit of lunch or something. But yeah, we just try and do it like that. And look, it's not perfect for either of us, and she'd like to have a bit more time with me, but something somewhere always does have to give, doesn't it? And I guess that's she's got a baby now. She's got a mini Matt to replace me. But yeah, I mean, I don't think I can't give a perfect answer. I always say, when it comes to balancing things, I don't really think I like to try and balance, because I think, almost like by definition, balancing means you've had to give up something to get something else. And I just kind of feel that I just do what I want because it feels right. And I guess almost prime example now to talk about is like you mentioned at the beginning, I had a new baby 3 days ago. But I mean, we had the baby on Sunday. I've been joking, saying that she's a perfect kid because she knew she had to come out on a Sunday, so as not to interrupt the working week. But baby came on Sunday, and I went home to sleep on Sunday night, left Elena and the baby in hospital, and I woke up say 8 o'clock on Monday morning, went into the hospital to go and see the baby, have a bit of breakfast and hang out with them till say 10:30. And then I was off and back. It was back to work and back to normal for me, and back on the phone and stuff. But that's because I guess that's really what I wanted to do. I could sit with Elena and the baby, but the baby sleeps 23 hours a day. Obviously I love touching her and kissing her or whatever, but I've got to. I don't really think I'm missing out on much. Now this is just my call. It might be wrong for somebody else, but I'm not missing out on much by not just being sat there in the house looking at a Moses basket, on a kid that's asleep. Elena's happy as Larry because she's playing with the baby and feeding her every 2 hours, and I get on with my day. And I just think I've then been at work yesterday, and I thought, what, I'm going to pop home for an hour because I want to go and see the baby. I want to go and check on Elena, and I think I just kind of try and. I don't balance. I just do what feels right at the time.
Go with the gut.
Yeah.
Something that I think is really true is that it's sometimes it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I think networking is obviously one of the core skills that's fundamental to your business. Is that something you've developed over a period of time, and how do you actively look to develop your network?
I mean, yeah, I've developed it over time. Whether or not anyone who knows me always talks about how good I've always been as a networker, whether that was done consciously, say 20, 15 years ago or not, or whether
networking with strippers.
I mean that did always help to to get people to a meeting, but no, I mean whether or not I kind of consciously knew what I was doing back then, or it was just something I was kind of naturally good at building relationships. But no, look, nowadays I make I always say probably 30-40% of my day or sort of my overall time is spent networking or spent building my network. And, I do that as a combination of with specific individual people that I'm probably already doing a bit of business with, or already know that I'm going to do some business with, and I want to, to kind of keep bonding with that relationship, or I'm just kind of casting the net out to people who are potentially good to be in my network because they're going to bring some value in some kind of way, whether it's financial or whether it's just a great person to have in my network. And I guess my top tip for anyone networking, because networking always comes with such a bad name, but I say it comes with a bad name because you're doing it wrong. It's like anything. I guess if you don't like, you say I don't like exercise. Well, maybe that's because you just row all the time and you don't like fucking rowing. Go and find something that you do like to do. But for me, I very much pick my targets. I kind of don't like using the word target. It sounds a bit mercenary, but I'm not going to randomly go to some BNI breakfast, where everybody's swapping business cards and forcing almost like forcing inverted commas opportunities on each other. I will have kind of two kinds of people I want to network with. One will be specific people that I know that there is something I can do with them. So it might be someone who's sold a business that I know could be a good investor for me, or it might be a particular funder or someone in a line of business that's got direct relevance to what I do. But then I also just like to grow my network with other high caliber people. Whether that's people with money or people with a story to tell, or people with influence, or whatever it may be, because I know that having them in my network, having them around me, will ultimately either lead me to meet somebody else who's great and hopefully will lead to some business and some financial reward. But worst case, just will enrich my life in some way that I've got another cool person around, someone that's intelligent to talk to, someone to pick the brains off. So I'm very careful about how I pick the people. And then I like to create circumstances that I'm in control of. Really, I'll put events on. Like you said, you came on the boat recently. I mean, that's something I've started doing in Dubai now. We're probably 10 or 11 weeks into that, where I'll put a dinner on the boat, dinner, drinks. I'll invite 4 or 5 people down. I get them to bring, a +1 or a +2. So I then get to spend a bit of time with the 4 or 5 people I've invited, and then get to meet 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 other people that I know will be a decent kind of person, because it's the +1 of somebody that I've already pre-vetted as a decent kind of person. And I do all that with kind of no agenda other than wanting to meet good people. Everybody on the boat gets to meet each other. In the last 10 or 12 weeks or whatever of doing this, there's already people who've met each other and done some business, or met each other and known that they've met someone who's going to lead onto another relationship. So the benefit for me is I get the kudos of being the introducer,
connector,
the connector. It's a kind of a captive environment, because it's Matt's night on Matt's boat. So again, that already gives me, I guess, a better kudos than just taking a few people out for dinner. So like I said, I pick the people, I control the environment, and I go in with no expectation other than to add some value and have a good time. And the final thing I'd say on that matter, because I know people listening to this will be saying, well, that's a great story, but I've not got a boat, and I haven't got the money to do it the way you do it. Well, 2 things I'll say. One is, I always look at networking as an investment, not an expense. So, there'll have been times that I kind of inverted commas can't afford to do something. Well, I don't know. You might say I've taken a guy out for a $5,000 event or something. We think, well, I haven't got $5,000 to spend on that, but I'm looking at that $5,000 as an investment because I know that what that guy's capable of doing further down the line, could pay off in spades. So that's one thing. Don't look at investment don't look at networking as a cost. Look at it as an investment. But secondly, it's all relative to where you are in your business and in your life. And 20 years ago, I couldn't be, taking people on boats. But what I always could be doing is doing fun and different things. And nobody wants to meet for a fucking coffee in Starbucks, right? But for the same price as a coffee in Starbucks, you could be taking some people on a hike, or taking them paintballing, or taking them on a gym session, or getting in the boxing ring, or whatever it may be. And all of these things are just something different. And where again you've arranged it, you've controlled the environment, but you've got people outside of the comfort zone, and they're going to remember you a lot more, and you're going to develop a much deeper relationship than if you just sat there, having a coffee or having a lunch or dinner.
I 100% agree, and I think people's guards tend to drop a lot in that respect because I think people are quite shielded. I think one of the things that's important that most people don't realise is that a lot of people's success is down to their awareness of what's around them. They've only got this small field of awareness. The more people the more different people come into your network, the bigger that awareness comes, and the bigger you can see opportunities and potentially icebergs in front of you you're about to collide with. And I think that's an important thing that people don't think of enough.
Well, I think another way to look at it is that unless you are, we're talking about the 1 in a billion problems, whether that's a problem or a business, and we talk about utter visionaries like an Elon Musk or something, take that out of the equation. Other than that, every problem you've ever got, every question that you ever want answering, somebody else has already solved that problem, and somebody else has already answered that question. Your job is just to get around as many of those.
Find that person.
Find that person, or find people like that person. To have around you, and every day, whether it's for me personally or whether it's for guys in my team, guys in my office, we have problems, and 8 times out of 10, I was like, hang on a minute. We've got an issue with Shopify. Well, you know what? I was at lunch last week with a guy who's, got $1 billion Shopify store. Let me give him a call. I'm sure his team's a lot more experienced than my team. Let me ask him a question, or whatever the relevant thing is. And like I said, every question has already been answered. You just got to find those people.
There's a saying I like, and it's a who, not how. And it's something I try to think of a lot. It's like I'm stuck with something. It's almost where some of my business are at the moment. I'm trying to find who's the next person who can fix some of the challenges we have and remove the blocks. And I think too many people get too much focus in the process rather than just trying to find someone who can just be like, you need to do these 1, 2, 3 things, and then off you go. Because I think too many people go off on a tangent trying to work things out themselves, when if they just, all I've done the last few years is try and find the next person to get me up the ladder, pay them to coach me to get through whatever it is, and then you get to where you want to be much quicker.
I think, similar vein to what we've both been talking about as well, but as a quick tip or takeaway for anyone listening or watching, is always ask for introductions, and always ask for referrals, because again, everybody normally wants to help you, particularly maybe not in England.
I agree with that.
But let's say if we're in Dubai, everybody's helpful, and everybody wants to see you succeed. And every successful person knows other successful people, and even aside from successful people, everybody kind of knows somebody. And if you say to somebody, oh, can you introduce me to someone who does this, or is there anyone that you think I should be meeting? As simple as that sounds, you just imagine you're making 20, 30 phone calls a day, and during those phone calls, when it's relevant or appropriate, you say to each of those people, by the way, before I go, anyone you think that you should introduce me to that's kind of relevant to what I'm up to. Even if 50% of them say yes, and 50% of that 50% actually lead to someone worth meeting, that's still 5 new people a day that are coming into your network, and it really is that simple. I think if we listen back to this whole podcast and the conversation we've had, I've not been speaking any rocket science here. It's just everything is simple principles. It's just that I guess until you know it, you don't know it.
I think a big thing I see from you is you do it consistently every single day. You don't take full days off where you don't do anything, I'm presuming.
Very rarely. Because mainly just because I don't want to, because
Enjoy it.
because I love everything I do. Now that's not to say I don't get tired at some point, and there's been times later where I've been going, I'm jiggered, I can't wait for a day off here or a couple of days on the beach with a book. I say it, but even when I then start to do it, I probably just need 3 or 4 hours. Just close my eyes in a darker room, watch a bit of telly, put the phone on do not disturb, and then I'm refreshed and I'm back on with it anyway. Because I only really do things that I love to do, and that doesn't mean they're not tiring. It doesn't mean they're not risky and they're not full of stress. But you only really get properly depleted and worn down if you've got a life of doing stuff you don't like, whether that's your job, your missus, or whatever it may be. But if you love the stuff you're doing, look, it's not going to be easy necessarily, but it's certainly going to give you energy as opposed to consume energy.
100%. One of the things you've made a big pivot and shift in your life is getting into fitness. I was joking with you beforehand, looking at some of your old podcast thumbnails. How has that impacted your life now when you look back comparatively?
It gives me more energy, definitely. I mean, look, it's funny because I've got to be careful how I say this now. You've been looking at my puffy face, but I never saw myself as horrendously out of shape or a particular fatty. I mean, I had always worked out. I mean, literally, even in those puffy face photos, I was still going to the gym and doing stuff. Then I think it was probably my diet that was worse than my lack of exercise was. But I mean, I can't advocate enough for fitness. For anyone in any walk of life, and I think it's when your body's better, your mind's better. You feel better, you look better. People respect you more when you're not fat and lazy. And I think it's a great cheerer upper. It's a great antidepressant. I think you just cannot overstress, the benefits of fitness and exercise. I mean, I try and force it onto some key members of my team back in the UK. I mean, when people come to stay with me and work with me out here, I kind of drag everyone down to the gym and stuff, and it's a bit easier to do when I'm next to them. But when I'm 3,000 miles away, if they're not bought into it, they're not bought into it. But ultimately, even the people who fight it in the beginning normally come around to the agreement and acceptance of the fact that it's impossible not to feel better after exercise than it is before, and you can really go and have a whole new gusto to the rest of your day.
And I think that's where a lot of people get the wrong conception with fitness. They need to think about, people think of fitness and health as a finite game that ends, and it needs to be thought of as an infinite game, because when you think about it, ends ultimately when you die. So the goal is to stay in the game for as long as possible. And the more you look after your body, the better you're going to feel, the better you're going to look, the younger you're going to look, the less your joints are going to be smashed. And if you look at the main reason most people die of quote unquote old age is they fall over, they break the hip, and then they die of some complication in hospital, which again, that shouldn't happen, that process, if you keep yourself very fit and strong.
I think that my advice to anyone as well is to find exercise that you like, because as much as I do all the exercise I do, and people might look at me as properly into my fitness, I wouldn't say I'm a fitness guy. I do the exercises that I enjoy doing, and I know the benefits of doing it. But you won't get me doing anything I don't like doing. So you're never going to find me in a spin class. You're never going to find me in a rowing machine competition or something, because I just don't enjoy those things. I love paddle tennis. We need
to play.
Yes, we do. I love playing football. I'm utterly terrible at it, but love that run around. Love boxing. Love normal tennis. So for me, I guess like we were saying about the work, that I enjoy what I'm doing. So it's not stress doing that. I just put into my diary fitness activities that I want to do. And then I just want to do them. So I think people always say, "What's the best exercise?" And I think the best exercise is the one you like the best, because it's the one you're going to stick at. It's the one that's going to be consistent. And I don't know, someone might tell me that you can burn more calories rowing than you are running. But if I don't like rowing, I'm going to give up after 2 days, aren't I? So I think find something you like. Even if you're going to start with walking. I mean, and a big part of my shift happened around the COVID time, when I was doing a lot of walking, because I didn't really have any other choice to do anything else. But I like to have a walk at night, listen to a podcast, reply to some WhatsApp messages, and if that's where you've got to start there. But don't overcomplicate it.
I would agree with that 100%. Adherence is the key. In my opinion, running is actually probably the worst thing most people can do to lose weight, and I'll explain why. Is the fact that if you're overweight, chances are you're very heavy, so your joints are going to hurt, and you probably can't run very far. Therefore, you won't burn many calories, which is very simple. One last question I want to ask you, Matt. What would be the biggest piece of advice you would give me to be more successful?
Biggest piece of advice to give you to be more successful?
I'm going to put you on the spot.
Probably continue to grow your audience and work on your personal brand more. I don't mean that in a way that there's a problem with it. But I just think ultimately, the more people that know you, the more opportunities that will come your way. Like I say, you've put me on the spot when I'm trying to think of what's relevant to you. But in your space, like you've got a clearly defined business model. You've got products that work for you. You've got proof of concept, and people obviously like it. You just need more eyeballs on it. And it really is that simple. If 1 million people know you, then you're going to get more results than if 100,000 people know you. So I'd just say do what you're doing, but do it at scale. And for anyone with a personal brand, realize that that's an investment as well. And put money behind it. Don't look at it as the ego of an Instagram post or something. It might be ego as well. But if people get to see you on Instagram, if people get to see you on TikTok, put the paid spend behind your content. Kind of cross-pollinate your content. You can repurpose a lot of stuff to get maximum impact. And obviously, you know all this anyway. If you're doing a video podcast that splits into an audio podcast that turns into a written transcript blog and all the mini clips. People think it's a lot more complicated than it actually is, but you really cannot underestimate the power of a personal brand. And the bigger that brand, the more opportunities that are going to come your way.
Agree. Our thoughts are very much aligned, so that's a good answer. Where can anyone find out more about you, Matt, your own podcast, social media? So yeah, I've got a podcast. I've got the podcast, The Matt Haycox Show, where I do long form interviews like this, conversations with great guests, and we have celebrities and business owners and just interesting people who give us some actionable advice by the end of the chat. You can get me on all things social. I'm the Matt Haycox, TheMattHaycox, and I've got my own website as well, which is matt-haycox.com, where we've got a lot of daily content, blog posts, educational stuff on there as well, and very soon to launch a newsletter. So jump on the website, sign up your email to the newsletter, and that'll be another way to find me too. Awesome, thank you very much. Everyone listening to the podcast, make sure you leave us a 5-star review, subscribe, and if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you smash the like button and comment below, and we'll see you next episode very soon.